Greetings, M Squared here. Today we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations using square roots. So most often, not always, but most often when we use square roots, it's because we're missing the b. So let me remind you, standard form of a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So when we're missing this b, that's the time we use square roots. This is like the beginning of solving by square roots algebra 1. Sometime later you would have an expression that you could do that in, but for right now, just know that that's what we're going to deal with. No b. Doesn't mean there can't be a b to use this, but we're just not going to. So what squared equals 16? That's kind of what you're asking, right? What value of x makes that true? So the thing that confuses people is you probably already are saying, oh, I know that, that's 4. But it's only half right. 4 does work, but you've got to remember that there is something else that's squared that makes that true, and that would be -4, because -4 times -4 is also 16. So a lot of people forget the negative, so that's why I said remember the plus or minus. We're going to get into being careful with negatives in a minute, but I just want you to grasp that. When you're square rooting something, you're going to get two answers, one positive and one negative. This is a different case. I'm saying what number squared equals a negative number. And there's no number squared that equals a negative number, until you learn all your numbers. So we haven't gotten into complex numbers, imaginary numbers. That's, again, Algebra 2. So for Algebra 1, this is not possible. You cannot multiply something and get a negative. So you could say 11 times 11, but that's 121. You could say -11 times -11, but that's also 121. So that's a no solution. We're saying that's not possible. And until you learn about imaginary numbers, it's not possible. So we're not going to do that. So the steps to solving an equation using square roots. The first step, so important, get x squared alone. You got to get it all alone, and I usually put it on the left side. If it's alone and there's a negative on the right side, like we just had up here, right, then we know we don't have to go any further. There's not a solution. So why go through and square root when you know there's not a solution? So that's why it's super important to pay attention after you get it alone. Is it negative? If it is, then you're done. The second thing is to take the square root of both sides. But when you do, remember there's going to be those two answers. So you're going to have like a plus and a minus. So mathematicians write plus and minus because they don't want to write two answers. They don't want to write 4 and -4. So instead they just write plus or minus 4, which means there's two answers, one +4, one -4. So you'll see that a lot with quadratics. And we solve, then we check. All right, let's get started. So the first thing we do is we get x squared alone. So how are we going to do that? We're going to add 49 to both sides. So we're going to get 3x squared equals 49 when we add 49 to both sides. X squared is not alone. We need to get it alone. So we're going to divide both sides by 3. X squared equals the square root of 49 over 3. That's how we get it there. Now, what we're going to do is just round to the nearest tenths, right? So we're going to take the square root of both sides. We're going to remember that it's a plus or minus. I'm not going to show you how to simplify square roots when there's a number in the denominator. It's called rationalizing the denominator. I'm not going to show you that in this video. You can look up another video on that. So we're just going to take whatever that is and square root it. So we're going to use our calculators for that. So we're going to take the square root. We're going to use our fraction key. We're going to say 49 thirds. Remember the ABC on this kind of calculator? Can't see it. The ABC is the fraction key, so I did 49, then hit that, and then 3, and it kind of gave me this backwards L, which means 49 over 3. So I'm going to press enter, whoops, and I get 4.04. It says round to the nearest tenth, so that's 4.0. I need the 0 there to show that I rounded to the tenths. Okay. If you, okay, we're going to go over here. Let's just go. So what are we going to do first? We're going to get x squared alone. So we're going to multiply both sides by -2 or divide both sides by -1/2. Either one. -2, -2. So x squared equals -72. X squared is alone. I check to see if it's negative. It is. What does that mean? That's impossible. There's no solution. So we're done. We don't have to actually put it. If you put that in your calculator, I'll show you what happens. So if you put the square root of negative 72 in your calculator, you're going to get a domain error because it's not possible. So make sure you understand that that error doesn't mean you did something wrong. It means that there's no solution when you get to this point. Make sure that you double check your negatives always, but that's what happens. Okay, so we're going to add 5 to both sides because we're trying to get x squared alone. And we're going to instead x squared, divide by 3. X squared equals 9. Okay, this time we don't have to round because we know that the square root of 9, we take the square root of both sides, right? Square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. So that's our answer. And I'm just looking up here. I should have done that to both sides because those weren't equal until I square rooted both sides. All right, over here we're going to add 19 to both sides. And what are we going to get? 25x squared, that's 4, and that's 1. So 25x squared equals 144. So, divide by 25. So we get x squared equals 144 over 25. Then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And when I do that, remember I get x plus or minus. If I recognize that they're both perfect squares, I don't use my calculator. I just usually leave it as a fraction. I know that the square root of 144 is 12. I know that the square root of 25 is 5. So that's what I do. But if you didn't and you wanted to use your calculator, you could say the square root of 144 over 25, and it gives you that is 2 2/5 or 2.4. But I like to just leave it like that. Okay, well, let's do a couple more. Okay, so notice that it's negative on this side, but until x squared is alone, we don't want to just say there's no solution. That's super important. So x squared equals 9. Notice that now it's not negative because we divided by a negative 10. So x equals plus or minus 3 because the square root of 9 is 3. And you have to have the plus or minus because both work. Okay, we're going to subtract 17 from both sides. I get 2x squared equals negative 4. Get x squared alone, I divide by 2, so x squared equals negative 2. But it's negative, right? So if it's negative and x squared is alone, both those things, there's a no solution. All right. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. We get 4x squared equals 49. If I divide by 4, I get x squared equals 49/4. And again, both of those are perfect squares. So when I take the square root, I get x equals plus or minus 7/2, which is 3.5. Either one works. I like that way. Okay, last one. We're going to subtract 45 because our goal is to get x squared alone. That's our first goal. 16x squared equals, so what is that? 5 gets me to 25, I believe. And so then I'm going to divide by 16. I'm going to get x squared equals 25/16. So if I square root both sides, I get x equals plus or minus 5/4. And that is how you solve quadratic equations using square roots. Good luck with that. Don't forget your steps. And watch out for those negatives. M squared, signing out.